Today I'm going to give you guys a first look of the all-new 60-gram Caddx Walnut action camera. This camera takes on the same form factor as the GoPro Session 5 and the Runcam Orange. This camera is promising to deliver 4K 60 frames per second at 100 megabits. You can even film in a 4:3 aspect ratio, and it supports GyroFlow stabilization. So I'm going to mention this right up front. This is not going to be a full review of this camera because I'm going to give Caddx the benefit of the doubt. Albert Kim made a video about this about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I ordered one immediately as soon as I saw his review. He then pulled his review about an hour later. He said that Caddx was going to delay the release of this camera, but I'd already placed my order, and guess what? It shipped. I'm guessing Caddx delayed the release of this camera because there are some issues with it. So I'm going to discuss those issues, but I'm also going to give it the benefit of a doubt. And I'm going to assume in about a month or so when this camera is actually shipping, these issues will be resolved and I will do a proper review on the camera. I just wanted to show you an early sneak peek as I have the camera in my hands now. I can tell you straight away that I am actually really impressed with the little package that it comes in. I like this little case. Everything fits in it real nice, so you don't have to have all these extra parts and pieces and D-filters floating around in an FPV bag. It also includes a small USB BEC to power the camera. I'm not quite sure how I feel about the mount that it came with. It is nice, but it doesn't really clip into the back. It uses tension to squeeze it together. I guess we'll find out how well it holds in a crash. One feature I'm really liking is this magnetic power adapter that's on the back. It takes a USB Type-C in the bottom so you can power it off of your battery, and you don't have to worry about the cables getting ripped out in a crash. This camera also conveniently has an internal battery, so you can charge it off the USB Type-C port on the side, and you can also find your SD card slot here as well. It also comes with a clear lens protector as well as an ND8 and 16. They can be easily threaded on and off the front of the camera. So let's go ahead and dive into the Caddx application. Connect to the camera by typing in the password 12345678, and I'll show you some of the problems I think this camera has right now that should be fixed with the firmware. So the camera does connect very quickly. There's no issues with the connection. You can change your resolution to 4K 30, 60, or a 4:3 at 30 frames per second, which is what I'm going to choose. The segment setting appears to be the amount of time the clip will be before it rolls over into a new one. I prefer the H.265 codec, so that's what I'm going to use. The LDC is the lens distortion correction. I'm going to turn that off and allow GyroFlow to do that for me. We'll talk about that more a little bit later. You definitely want to make sure you have the gyro data enabled. I'm going to use the 180-degree shutter rule and set my shutter at twice my frame rate. Now, this is where the problems start. Auto white balance, you can't change it. It's set to auto. You can't do sunny, you can't do cloudy. Every time you go to make a change to it, it always reverts back to auto. So this appears to be a firmware issue that Caddx is going to have to iron out. I'm going to set my sharpness down to low. I prefer to add sharpness in post-production. Now this is a big issue to me right now, the image quality. If you change it from high to standard, it doesn't really make a difference. This camera is advertised to shoot 100 megabits per second, but when you look at the actual data of the file after it's done recording, I'm only getting about 50. Hopefully this is something that's going to be rolled out in a future firmware update. Now let's briefly take a look at data within GyroFlow. You can see that there's already a lens profile created for this, which is great. Another issue I'm currently seeing with the gyro data is it's about 5 seconds off from the actual video recording. So you can see where I impacted on landing there is off. So if you set the gyro data offset by 5 seconds and do an auto sync, it syncs up pretty good. Now let's take a peek at some of the issues I'm having with the actual image quality. You can tell that it's very contrasty, and I'm also getting this strange halo effect when I'm filming in the 4:3. You can see a ring, almost like a vignette, all the way around when you're facing toward the sun. I didn't seem to have this problem when I didn't film in the 4:3 aspect ratio. If I used the 16:9 aspect ratio, it seemed to get rid of that halo effect. This video was a little bit overexposed when looking at the bright highlights, but it was hard to tell from the ground because it is so contrasty. The image quality is noticeably worse when you're filming in 4K as opposed to 4K 4:3 when you're using stabilization. Now keep in mind, I'm only able to currently get about 50 megabits a second out of this camera. If the bitrate doubles in a future update, it's going to make a huge difference. I'm also noticing that the image is very oversaturated. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get a flat color profile in a future firmware update. So I'm going to leave you guys with the 4:3 aspect ratio 4K footage at 30 frames per second, processed with GyroFlow and color corrected in Final Cut Pro. The image quality isn't terrible, but it's not great either. So hopefully Caddx is going to come out with that 100 megabit per second firmware update by the time this camera is officially released. I do see a lot of potential in this camera. Currently, this camera costs about $50 more than the Runcam Orange and the Runcam Thumb Pro, and the image quality isn't looking that much better right now. Hopefully that firmware update will change everything. I want you guys to stay tuned to the channel so I can give this camera a fair shakedown when it's fully functional and operational. I just wanted to share with you guys what I had so far in my first impressions. I want to thank you guys for sticking around till the end of the video. My name is Lee, and this is Adventure FPV.